Finance Committee meeting for the City of Franklin. It is Thursday, May the 15th. I'll call the meeting to order by roll call vote. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Here.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Here.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Present.
And the chair votes present, so we're all here. The second item on the agenda is consideration of changes in the agenda and setting the agenda. Does anyone have any changes that they wish to make? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to set the agenda as written.
I move to approve.
Proper motion, is there a second? Let's do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
The chair votes yes also on that, so that we do pass the agenda as presented. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizen comments. If there's any citizens that are here that wish to comment, you've got a couple of minutes. If you want to come to the podium, we'll give you an opportunity. Seeing no one jumping up out of the audience, we'll go on then to item 2, which is consideration of approval of the minutes, April the 10th, 2025 Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Hope everyone's had a chance to look at those. Any corrections, deletions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Proper motion, is there a second?
Second.
Let's do a roll call vote on that also. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also. Let's go to item 3 then, which is consideration of draft ordinance 2025-12, an ordinance to amend the budget of the City of Franklin for fiscal year 2024-2025. Eric, are you going first? Michael?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Budget and Finance Committee. Michael Walters Young, your Chief Budget Performance Officer. This is Budget Day of all days here at the Budget and Finance Committee. And before we propose a new budget for the new fiscal year, we're going to finish amending the budget for the current year. That is what Draft Ordinance 2025-12 sets out to do. There are 3 components to this amendment. The first is to maintain a balanced general fund, which is a requirement of the state of Tennessee. The second, another requirement of the state of Tennessee, is to ensure appropriate year-end fund balances in all funds. And third is to maintain appropriate funding of approved capital investment plan projects. So starting in the general fund, revenues are set to increase by roughly $3.885 million over the current budget. There are 5 components that explain this. The first is an increase in property tax revenues in the general fund of $600,000. Now, this is not additional property taxes collected by the city, but rather, when we built the debt service budget for this fiscal year, we assumed that when we were going to issue the $43.775 million of general obligation bonds, we would do so earlier in the year. As a result, we budgeted an interest payment of $600,000 as an approximate to service that debt. Since we didn't issue until March of 2025, there is no cost incurred in the current fiscal year. That revenue can be moved out of the debt service fund into the general fund to cover additional costs. You will see later in this presentation a commensurate reduction of revenues and expenses in the debt service fund. The second is an increase of $1.6 million in the budget for local option sales tax. This budget had assumed a roughly 3% increase over 2024. Year to date, we are averaging collecting 5.5% higher than the previous fiscal year. This will get us very close to where we believe we're going to end the fiscal year. You can see in your detailed 2026 budgets, we're looking at $65.3 million. From a budget standpoint, we estimate $65.4 if conservative trends continue in the final 4 months of collections. The third component is an increase in the state business tax. That was under budgeted in both fiscal 23 and 24, and again in 25. When we look at actual collections, we've been averaging $800,000 to $1 million more, and so we're recognizing $500,000 in additional state business tax that, again, we believe will recognize in fiscal 25. The fourth is a pass-through grant for Franklin's Charge of $970,935. This is a grant received by the City of Franklin and for Franklin's charge by the American Battlefield Trust to assist in the acquisition of Danimark Tract. And finally is the best way I can describe this, both in revenues and expenses, is an accounting entry. Requirement that where we recognize the recording of lease proceeds for software leased on behalf of the city for use. You're going to see this. You've seen it in the audit. You're going to continue to see it. It's the joy of GASB Statement 96. There's a commensurate expense also that will show up here in a slide or two. On the expense side, that's going up as well, a matching $3.885 million. The first component are personnel cost modifications of about $1.5 million. Excuse me. The predominant amount of this is taken up in adjusting for vacancy adjustments. When we build the fiscal year budget, we always include a 3.5% vacancy in all departments. This has been a historical trend most years. But if you have a small department especially, and there are no vacancies in that year, you don't recognize that savings. And so in order to keep budgets level and in balance, if you look at the detail of the ordinance, you will see that there are a lot of $10,000 transfer or $20,000 transfer or 15 or 30. That's the lion's share of this increase. There's also covering extra duty pay for special events in the police department. Keep in mind that we do recoup the money if a detail is issued or asked for. We do charge for that, but we do not charge for city events against city departments. Overfills in the Franklin Fire Department, and then retirement payouts. We've had a series of retirements this year. We budget for that in general expenses and transfer it out into departments when needed. Expenses are going down about $112,000. There's a lot of small in and outs, but I will highlight three of the bigger amounts. $175,000 increase in fire operations, primarily for repair of vehicles and equipment. If you remember, when we've been issuing bonds, we've been borrowing money to get fire engines and towers, and those have a 30-ish month lead time, and so if we don't get them quicker, we're repairing the vehicles we have, and we do our best to budget, but some years, those costs are higher than we had originally anticipated. There is an increase of $700,000 in the facilities budget, and that makes it line up with the fiscal 26 budget. We have moved all utilities out of police and fire and parks and other departments for electric and gas and the operations of facilities into one central cost center, and that is the project of facilities maintenance budget. And a net decrease of about $1,075,000 in traffic operations as a result of projects which are primarily grant funded and primarily put into one fiscal year, but just not being completed, we believe, until next year. The third component of the general fund increase is, again, the pass-through for Franklin's charge. And the fourth is a transfer of $1.5 million into the Stormwater Fund. For many years, the Stormwater Fund has had a fund balance. For the last several years, we have been spending more than we've been taking in. We last looked at this fee in 2018, last raised the fee, I believe, in fiscal 22. We have slowly but surely drawn down that fund balance when we have replaced larger pieces of equipment and maintained personnel and operations. Transferring $1.5 million now allows the fund to be in balance to close fiscal 25 and have an appropriate fund balance at the end of fiscal 26, and allows you to purchase the recommended street sweeper in the city administrator's recommended budget that was a top 15 BOEM PER priority. We will be doing a cost of service study for this fund in the ensuing fiscal year and bring recommendations and suggestions on what to do with it as part of the fiscal 27 budget. The Road Impact Fund has approximately $11 million, or not approximately, exactly $11 million of transfers for 3 projects to the Capital Projects Fund to cash fund approved projects. $2.5 million from Collector Area 1 for the Jordan Road improvements, $3.5 million from Collector Area 2 for Long Lane and Paytonsville Road improvements, and $5 million from arterial road impact fees for East McEwen 4 improvements. City facilities tax is an increase of $3.033 million, $33,800 for a mower from Parks. That was a program enhancement request funded in fiscal '24, but did not come in until fiscal '25. And $3 million in the form of a transfer to cash fund the improvements which are getting closer and closer to being done at Bicentennial Park. The next transfer is the aforementioned increase in revenues via transfer of the general fund to the stormwater fund. The hotel motel fund has an increase of $1 million to fund projects, the project which is also very close to completion, improving the main barn at Harlansdale Farm. And then the offset and the increase in, or the decrease in both revenues and expenses in the debt service fund that I mentioned. Overall fund balance, the debt service fund and the general fund have no change. There is a decrease in both the road impact fund, the city facilities tax, and the hotel motel fund, and an increase in the fund balance to end the year in the stormwater fund. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any and all questions about the fiscal '25 operating budget.
Do we have any questions? If we have no questions, we will need a motion, I'm assuming, for this to be passed on to the full board with our approval. So I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2025 and the recommendation that it be passed on to the full board for their approval also.
Move to approve.
Second.
Proper motion is second. Let's do a roll call vote. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also. Passes 4-0. Let's go to item 4, which is consideration of draft ordinance 2025-13, an ordinance of the city of Franklin, Tennessee, adopting a budget for the fiscal year 2025-2026, providing an effective date. We have Mr. Stuckey and Mr. Young on that. Do you wish, you want to lead out on that?
I will take the lead on that.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Budget and Finance Committee. It's my honor and my responsibility to report to you and recommend to you today the fiscal '26 budget. This process started publicly back in December when you all looked at budget goals. And then for the next 5 months, you heard from every single department, all of our leadership there. You gathered information, you heard projections about revenues, you listened to input. And today's the day we present to you publicly the recommended budget for fiscal '26. Oh, let's get this moving. There we are. So I'm going to walk through a budget overview for you. We'll look specifically, dig into especially our primary operating fund, the general fund, touch on our other funds, both operating and capital funds and other funds that we use, and then provide an overview of where we are and then seek some guidance and direction from you as we move forward. A summary of those goals that you all laid out for us at the beginning of this process was to focus on maintaining a high quality level of service for the community. That's an incredibly important component of delivering on quality of life for the community. That we preserve capacity to meet future needs and service needs down the line as well, invest in and plan for our future, and be a highly competitive community. Specifically in 2026 and fiscal 2026, there were two primary focuses that I looked at, and that was around our opportunity to be able to fund a partnership with the Tennessee Department of Transportation to provide for improvements specifically on Mac Hatcher, widening both of southeast and northwest to have capacity there, because we have proposed a partnership with the state to deliver those roads. And then the second primary point I wanted to focus in on is the completion of an update of our comprehensive compensation plan, and to have that implemented in this budget, part of which we did in the fiscal '25 budget, but to finish that up. So the top line numbers within this budget, looking at all funds, what is proposed to you today is a all funds budget of $243.3 million. That's actually a little bit of a decrease from the budget that Michael just talked to you about in terms of amended and updated fiscal '25. It's a decrease of about 2.7%. But then the general fund is proposed at $128.1 million, and that's a 9.7% increase. And that is primarily driven by a reset driven by the reappraisal of property that has taken place throughout 24 and 25, but it was just recently completed. As recently as Monday, we received the certified tax rate. So this has been a work in progress. We made several assumptions and have updated that based on what the reappraisal has brought us. Our total tax base assessment for Franklin has risen to $10.75 billion, and that is an increase from the current level, which is at $7.6 billion. To put that in other terms, a penny of property tax rate in Franklin now will deliver $1.05 million. Under the previous appraisal, that was at $750,000. Taking the current rate and what happens in this process once properties are all reappraised and new values set and allocated, then the certified tax rate is modified so that the same general revenue, total revenue is generated from the newly appraised tax base. So that means your current property tax rate today of 32.61 cents per $100 of assessed valuation declines to 23.1 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So we now have a new base rate to work from as we formulate the fiscal 26 budget. So when we look at this point in time and the decisions in front of us, I've brought forward to you a specific opportunity and a specific recommendation to dedicate a component of property tax capacity for the advancement of important infrastructure projects and the enhancement of our operations and our services going forward. In full transparency, when I built this budget, I built it to support two partnership projects with TDOT. That is the widening of Mack Hatcher Southeast and the widening of Mack Hatcher Northwest. We now know that one of those projects is in the 10-year plan for TDOT, and that is Southeast Mack Hatcher. So that is a little different from the number we set, but also the target we set, and I felt it was important for us to fully meet and recommend to you a budget that met the commitment we made to TDOT when we proposed those two projects. So that's what this base recommendation provides you. Southeast is in that plan. There are obviously other capital investment needs that can be considered as you look at this. And then, of course, we look at the opportunity to enhance city services over this year and in coming years, specifically looking at public safety and looking at base services around streets and parks and other key components. This is similar to what we did in Invest Franklin in 2016, and that has carried us through to this point. And we're calling it Invest Franklin 2.0. It's an update of what we had done before. That dedicated funding really became the backbone of our 10-year capital plan, which now focuses on the opportunity to deliver over $500 million or $500 million of improvements to the community over a 10-year period of time. This refresh gives you more capacity to look at those opportunities, and the property tax proposed to you in the fiscal 26 budget is a 32-cent per $100 of assessed valuation property tax rate. So let me break that down. It's in three components. The first component is the certified tax rate that we just heard about from the reappraisal, and that's 23.1 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, and that covers existing operations and the projects that we commit to in terms of both debt service and cash funding that are already in your Invest Franklin capital projects. The next component is 6.8 cents, and that's what funds the Invest Franklin 2.0 component, specifically, as we know it today, the Mack Hatcher widening in Southeast, and then the potential to fund other capital investment projects that you identify. And then finally, just over 2 cents, 2.1 cents for city operations and enhanced service delivery, both in this budget and beyond. So that's the property tax story. The other revenue component is to take the final step in raising our hotel occupancy tax up to the maximum permitted limit. We are currently at 4% in our hotel tax, and we are proposing that we move that to 5%. This rate was last adjusted in 2004, and this is a statutorily approved maximum that we can go to. You can do it just through board action and claim that last percent. From a policy standpoint, the board has consistently used hotel occupancy tax revenues to support parks and to support other initiatives and improvements that directly support tourism in our community and help drive revenue in the hotel tax itself and that element, that vital element of our local economy.
Can I ask you a question before you go to
Sure.
the next one, which is the 0.068?
Yes,
I guess I'm not doing my math very well.
it's 6.8 cents on $100 of assessed valuation.
And that's 2.3 cents above that.
Yeah, well, you've got 23.10, which is your base rate. And then you're
Okay.
adding 6.8, and then you're adding 2.1, which takes you up to 30.
Gotcha.
32.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Okay, so that's a component, and we'll circle back to that at the end of the presentation, because that's really where the heart of the decision, policy decision, that you and the full board will make in this process. So let me hit some highlights of the budget overall. It is obviously a balanced budget. We always have a balanced budget, but we also look at ongoing revenues and ongoing expenditures being in sync, and they are. This fully complies with your policies related to debt and related to fund reserves, and we are maintaining and enhancing our service levels to the community. This does include the Invest Franklin 2.0 initiative that I just talked about, and that 32-cent tax rate that's proposed here remains one of the lowest rates in the state of Tennessee and nationally when we look at competitive cities. The budget does include 10 new positions across all funds. 8 of those positions are in the general fund. 7 of those 8 are related to public safety. And let me break down those 8 for you. There are 3 on-shift firefighters, 3 police officers that will be directly assigned to patrol. There's a victim support counselor that will also be in the police department. And then finally, IT will add a information systems developer position. So those are your 8 general fund positions. We add 1 in sanitation because we're going to need to add an additional route within the sanitation department. So that's driven by growth and our service needs there. So the operator is added to the sanitation fund. And then the water management fund will add a new fiscal affairs manager. So an internal finance person to serve that department. It's an operation that now exceeds $51 million a year in terms of its budget, and assigning a direct fiscal affairs person seems to be an appropriate fit there. The other personnel piece we always look at, health insurance is a major important benefit to our team, and the premiums remain unchanged from where they are today. There is an adjustment to the deductibles to our employees, and those are going up for the first time in over 20 years. Specifically, we have a $500 deductible for single and $1,000 for family. That will shift to $650 and $1,300 for a family in the new proposed budget. Let me stop here real quick and just touch on some things that aren't on here. These are all related to positions, but we did go through what we call program enhancements, additions to the budget, and the board did some rating and gave us some feedback on that. And of your collective top 15, 13 of them are funded in the recommended budget. So we're pleased to be able to address so many of those. Let me just hit some highlights of the non-personnel side of those enhancements. And that includes the replacement of our current financial system. It is in the last stages of its useful life, if you will, and will stop being supported in 2029. So we're proposing $1 million in this year's budget and $1 million in next year to help secure that new system and make that transition. We are also needing to upgrade our data center and disaster recovery center that we physically house in the police headquarters, but it supports the entire city operations, and that needs to be replaced. That's just a little bit over $750,000. We are also supporting through hotel motel tax funds a couple really important initiatives. One is adding additional portable vehicle barriers that we put out, especially at downtown street festivals, to provide additional coverage and safety for those large-scale events. They're also available to go anywhere we want to take them in terms of providing and dividing off an area where the public may be gathered to provide for safety and keep vehicles from getting where vehicles don't belong. We're also enhancing the sports lighting at Jim Warren Park. That's included in here as well. And we are replacing the worn playground surface at Liberty Park as well. So those are key components there. Those three are all funded through hotel motel tax. Two other things I'll touch on real quick back on the general fund that are in the non-personnel category. We are buying new brine equipment. The existing is well past its useful life, so that will help us as we get into the winter months. And then the expansion of our emergency preemption system with our traffic signals and that integrated system is funded both this year and would anticipate a similar funding next year at $160,000 each year to help expand that system. And is something that's being highlighted nationally as a really successful innovation and providing for the safe and efficient movement of emergency resources when calls come. So the other really important leg of this budget that I referred to is the update of our compensation plan. And this was to move us to a highly competitive position. We've operated for many years targeting the 75th percentile of competitive local governments in the market, and we have moved that to the 90th percentile. And so now we're doing that for across the organization. You may recall we did that last year in the fiscal 25 budget for our police and fire team members. We're doing the same for everybody across our organization. We think that's critically important in attracting and retaining the best talent to serve our community. Also, in terms of wages for our employees, we provide a base 2.5% general pay increase, and then a performance-based, an additional layer on top of that, that would range from 0.5% up to 2.5% for those team members. There is a $2 increase in the residential waste or trash and recycling collection fee. You've actually already approved that as part of this year's budget. There are 2 years of rates approved, so that second year goes into place. And then we also, and that goes into place January 1. Also effective January 1 would be an update to your water and sewer rates. You're still going to take formal action on that, but this budget reflects the kind of the verbal approvals you've given us in the review of those rates, and that again would go into place January 1 of 26. We referenced this when we talked about the Invest Franklin 2.0. The hotel occupancy tax is proposed to go up 1% from 4% to 5% in terms of visitors and with the vacation rentals that happen in the community. And then you'll see throughout this budget, we do provide key performance measures about how we're performing, how we're delivering on the dollars that are in that budget, and also look at sustainability for what we provide and how we provide those services. This is the org chart update. Not a lot of change, but I'll touch on a couple things that really don't have financial impact, but are important to recognize from the organization. We're updating the name of our Parks Department to be the Parks and Recreation Department, more fully reflective of the work that department does. We have fully integrated the purchasing office as a component of our finance department. So that actually has already happened, but no financial change, but it just makes that a little more efficient and combines it with the finance team and is a good way to support both those functions. Margaret Wilson, who's sitting right next to me, will have a change in title. She will move from being called our comptroller to be our director of finance. So it's a more modern and accurate description of the work she does as our finance director and more consistent with what you see across the country in that similar role. And then within the law department, again, these are title changes, no budgetary impact, but we are updating our assistant city attorney title to deputy city attorney and our staff attorney to assistant city attorney, more reflective of the experience and the level of work that those two individuals are doing. All right, so let's look at the numbers in the general fund in terms of where the revenue comes from. Our top revenue source continues to be local option sales tax, what we receive from local retail activity. And of course, that local sales tax, half goes to public education and the other half goes to the city in which it's generated. So, and a like number is going into public education in our community that you see in your general fund budget. It's 52% of that general fund. Our second highest revenue source is property tax, just under
Eric.
16%. Yes.
On that, does that just go then to the county and then the county splits it out between I guess it's one S now, and FSD?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that it gets, we never see it. it goes directly to those entities and then splits out from there. The other component is state shared tax, which is also really a redistribution of sales tax out to communities based on their population. And then you see sort of a grab bag at the 1, 2, 3, up to 4% of different components, be it the alcohol tax, franchise fees, building permits, et cetera. Looked at another way, we like to draw your attention to the fact that nearly 3/4 of this budget, 71%, is driven by consumption activity. So that's all the sales tax and use taxes that are incorporated there. With a really vital local economy, that's a good thing for us. That helps us have a lower property tax rate, quite frankly. But it is also more susceptible to economic change. We saw that in the Great Recession. We saw that in COVID. So that is why when you look at our policies around reserves, that we hold a higher reserve level so that we can buffer against those changes in economic conditions. Looking at where we spend those dollars, when you look at functional areas, program areas, public safety is 44% of this proposed budget, and then it's a pretty equal division between our public works, our community development, our finance and administration components across the organization. When you look at the categories of expenditures, just under 70%, 68% is dedicated to salary and benefits of our team members. And I always say that we serve the people of this community through the people of our team, and our budget reflects that so much of this is driven by your talented professional staff and the cost to support that. This is just an overall performance review that you look dating back to 2017 all the way through what's projected in fiscal 25 and what this budget contains in fiscal 26. You'll see that we have been successful in adding to our reserves at some level and every year in that window. Even in the COVID year, we were just slightly above water there and were able to contribute a little bit to our reserves to keep that strong. You do provide for a policy related to reserves at 33% as a minimum, and then anything above 45% is eligible for the use of as cash for your capital programs, your capital investment programs. One of the things we also do, as I move on to the other budgets in general fund, we do an exercise to do a 5-year outlook. And so the items we've put in this recommended budget, we test that out over the next 5 years. Very conservative revenue estimates, and then also some other additional expenses that you could expect in terms of the need to add staff and other capacity in the out years. And this budget performs very well. There's only a small variation in what that does to your reserves. It goes from that 70% level that you see in fiscal 26, I think at the end of 5 years, in a very kind of difficult set of assumptions, down to only about 61% of reserves. So it's a very sustainable kind of pressure test of that budget. So the summary of what's been presented to you in the general fund is Invest Franklin 2.0 provides the opportunity to advance critical projects, specifically in this opportunity, the Mack Hatcher widening for Southeast in partnership with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and also enhanced services. We've invested in our people, our most important resource, through an updated compensation plan that puts us in a highly competitive position. And you come through year end with a very strong position in terms of reserves and capacity to meet future needs. All right, so here's the overview. This is the numbers behind some of the graphics you've just seen related to our general fund and various revenue sources within it. Sales tax, again, is the largest source, over 52%. We're assuming a growth rate in this budget for local sales tax at just over 2.6%. This is a good bit lower. It's less than half of where we are today in terms of the growth we saw in fiscal 25. Michael reported that to you in the amendment. So far in fiscal 25, we've seen about 5.5% growth in sales tax, but we want to be cautious. We want to be conservative. We know there's some economic uncertainty out there potentially, so we think this conservative number of 2.6% growth is reasonable. One comparison that we like to draw is that property tax versus sales tax It's around a 2-to-1 ratio typically. We've closed the gap on that a little bit in fiscal '26 with what we've proposed. But it's really probably the inverse in most other cities in Tennessee, where property tax is probably the 2-to-1 versus sales tax. But because of the strong activity we have in retail, when you look at large regional mall, a very vibrant downtown, we do have a strong sales tax generation component in our budget. The property tax moves from the number 3 revenue source to the number 2 revenue source in this budget, thanks largely to what Invest Franklin 2.0 provides you. It is still one of the lowest property tax rates in the state, and you see that history going back to the mid to late 80s, where it was somewhere north of $2 of property tax rate down to where it is today at 32 cents. One other component related to intergovernmental, that's that state shared tax that's driven by population. The state legislature just passed in this last session a update that provides for the update of city populations based on projections from the Boyd Center at the University of Tennessee. What that means for us is we don't have to go do special censuses to go get our number anymore. They'll rely on those projections, which we have seen through the years are very accurate, very, very close estimates, to set and reset that per capita revenue that goes out to cities. So that will eliminate an expense for us in the future, an effort and an uncertainty around trying to collect population numbers. So we're thankful for that change. Wish they'd made it last year, but that's okay. Let's see here. A couple other key components in the general fund revenue. You'll see our alcohol consumption tax component is down just slightly from what we are projecting in fiscal '25, about flat though. Building permit and licensing numbers up about 6.7% compared to '25, based on activity that we're seeing and projecting. Grants down a little bit, but I'll tell you, grants are always a little bit of a grab bag based on when grants come through and the timing of projects. What we're projecting right now is about a 10% reduction. And we also see things like spending down of the ARPA funds, like the projects that we're working, that as those get drawn down and completed or closer to completion, this number comes down correspondingly. Interest income is down from what we have in '25, but still much stronger than what we saw just a few years ago. So that's a component of our revenue. Here's the fund balance reflection. We've really already touched on that, but you've got about a 70% fund balance projected at the end of fiscal '26. And again, we talk about 33% being your minimum. Anything above 45% is available for pay-as-you-go capital use. And that in dollars, that's about $30 million of capacity. Now, that is largely built into our capital plans, but that is something to bear in mind that helps us. When you look at that 10-year capital plan, less than half of that is funded by debt. All right, so these are the expenditure numbers, just the more detail that you saw the charts on before in terms of where we spend it in the broader categories, as well as the broad categories of use and personnel, operations, and capital. When you look at our pension system, this is a key component in supporting our team and our retirees. Is fully funded. We're meeting the actuarial recommendations. The closed pension, which is all employees hired before 2017, that is up about $1 million from where it was in fiscal '25, at about $11 million. And then the open plan, the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System program, is at about 4.8% of salary. That's actually down about 0.2% from the existing level. And collectively, both closed and open pension account for about 17.9% of your total payroll in supporting the pension obligations. Outside funding of outside entities, we spent a good bit of time at our last meeting talking more about that. We took a fairly base approach to this and only provided about a 2.5% inflationary increase to the existing agencies. We did not add any new agencies. And know that one of the things we put on the work plan for this group going on to the board was some additional policy guidance about how to handle those allocations and what might guide those going forward. The exceptions to the inflationary 2.5% increase is the Animal Control Center. We have that as a contractual obligation that's a little bit larger than inflation, and it's also based on, I think, a population number. So that's up a little bit higher. And then there is a one-time project contribution to the African American Heritage Society and the Merrill Williams House project. You'd provided $50,000 last year, and this provides a second $50,000, and that is funded through the Hotel Motel Tax Fund. So their original ask in '25 was either 50 or 100. We only gave 50. This really kind of completes what you can look at as the original ask there. This slide just gives you a list of the other funds where you can find them in the budget document if you want more detail. I'm going to give a quick overview of each of the funds. These are the numbers associated with those funds and how that lays out. The all funds budget, again, just over $43 million. It's down about 2.7% compared to the current year's budget. So let's touch on the other funds and some key components there. Michael touched on this in the amendment. The budget for stormwater is actually down in this budget, but still we're running close on where those reserves are and the need and the draw from that fund. It's down about 6%. We did have to transfer money in this budget to purchase a replacement street sweeper. There were not sufficient funds in the stormwater fund to do that, so the general fund's filling that gap to replace that piece of equipment. We do propose, as part of our work plan on the staff side, an updated review of the stormwater fee that could be considered as part of your fiscal '27 budget process. And sanitation, that budget is down about 8%. It's at $12.5 million. That's always driven a little bit by equipment coming in and timing of that, but you may recall we did a significant cost of service study within sanitation last year, and you approved 2 years of rates. The second year is implemented January 1 of '26, is a $2 adjustment, moving from $31 a month to $33 a month for the full complement of services from sanitation. This did exactly what we projected when we talked about cost of service. It is now a fully rate-supported fund in terms of its operations and long-term needs. There is no general fund subsidy in this year or in next year's budget, and it projects to be solid and well-supported by ratepayer funds and not require general fund help going forward. The hotel motel tax is projected at $3.7 million. That there is some debt service assigned to that, and then several of your capital projects related to, especially parks projects, are in that budget. We're proposing moving from 4 to the maximum 5% permitted by state law. Some key things that are funded in that fund this year in the budget. The downtown parking study that's been proposed, that's split 50-50 between the general fund and this tourism-related tax fund, hotel motel. We think that's a key component of understanding downtown and supporting downtown parking. The upgrade to lighting, sports lighting at Jim Warren, the purchase of the vehicle barriers that we talked about, and the contribution to the Merrill Williams home is also included in that fund. The various development funds, we put pretty conservative projections in there, but that is a significant cash contributor also to various projects. And you've got debt service obligations, as well as equipment for expansion of services. So there's a new material handler in the sanitation fund. There's the new piece of equipment, the side loader that'll support the additional route in sanitation. Those are both purchased through the facilities tax because it's an expansion of what we do. I think that covers it pretty well. We'll talk about water and wastewater fund. That's a $51.2 million budget. That is a decrease from where it is today. And you've got about $18.5 million assigned to water, $32 million assigned to the sanitary sewer water reclamation function, and then $558,000 for the reclaimed water system. This does include the assumed water rate increases in your new multi-year plan, 6% for water and 5% for sewer, effective January 1. And then we've got a reduction overall in the total debt service in this fund, but it's still a significant component, $8.4 million in that budget that supports the upgrade and expansion of the existing plant. And that's supported by a very low rate from the state revolving loan fund. But that fund, and that loan from that fund runs through 2053. All right, so just summarizing the overall budget, we continue to invest in key components to be in a competitive position, both in terms of delivering projects and high level of services. We do include investing in our city team through the updated compensation plan and the Invest Franklin 2.0 initiative. Our reserves are strong. We have a strong financial position, well above your policy levels, but also provides great stability. Just a month or so ago, we received a reconfirmed AAA bond rating from both Standard & Poor's and Moody's, which places us among the very highest level of cities across the country with a double AAA, and even more narrow when you look at a double AAA city that is experiencing growth, because most AAA cities are pretty much built out. We're a city that is has a strong established core, but is still experiencing growth. And so to hit a AAA standard in that context is rare and speaks strongly to the strength of our economy, the strength of the policy work that you all have done, and the continuity, consistency, and high quality of our organization overall. So I want to return to this slide, because this is where the heart of the decision-making is for you all in this process. And it talks about establishing a property tax rate. And the three components that we talked about, the base, which is the equalized version of the property tax that's in place today at 23.1 cents or 0.231, and then the Invest Franklin 2.0 component at 0.068, and then an additional support for city operations at 0 or 0.021. That brings in total to 32 cents. And then the increase in the hotel occupancy tax up to 1%, which just requires a direct board action there. So let's talk a little bit about process. First reading is set for the May 27th meeting. This is an important threshold. I would strongly recommend, if we can, if possible, and I'll reach out to the rest of the board on this, if there's a desire to have a different tax rate than what we've written up at 32 cents, that would be a great time to have it, so that when we establish the public hearing on June 10th, we can have the rate that you all want us to pursue published in time for that first meeting in June. We are required to provide a specific notice when we exceed the existing certified rate. So anything you do above the 23.1 cent equalized rate that has just been sent to us will require additional published notice, just that you're going above that what's seen as the existing certified rate. Your second reading and public hearing will be June 10th, and that would be, that's where we hear from the public and have that vote. And then your final, and third and final reading is scheduled for June 24th. So as we work through this, I would strongly suggest that we work to get what you need in terms of additional information, other considerations to help you set that rate with your other board colleagues on the 27th of May. I plan to set aside a significant chunk of additional time at the work session on the 27th to help us do that. You'll also have time at the voting session to do that, and of course, public comment is recommended or is welcomed at any step of the way along this path. Have a little more data we share as you get into the discussion side, but I'll close out the kind of prepared comments with just a thank you to you for the work you've put in the last many months as we've worked through this, and we've heard from every department, the board overall, and the feedback they've provided. Our budget and performance team, which is in the back row here, our finance team who's helped support this. The assistant city administrators are very helpful support and brain trust to me as we think through and I decide what recommendation I want to bring forward to you. So that's Vernon and Christine and Mark. And then the departments, both their leadership, but also key people throughout each department that put budgets together, that deliver on the services we do every day. Their work really matters, both in this process and just what they do every day. So that really concludes my prepared remarks. We glad to delve into whatever you want to talk about. I think that what I think is at the top of your list, but you can tell me, is probably that discussion around what you want to do on property tax rate and how we want to move this forward, knowing that we'll provide some dedicated time at the next work session on the 27th for the board to give us that guidance. And I'll send to them that same outline that I gave you in terms of the timing and the different components involved in the approval process.
Comments so far? Let me ask, we basically covered items 5 and 6. did we
Yeah,
not?
this really covers 5, 6, and 7 in some way in terms of an overview.
Especially 5 and 6.
Yeah, Michael can maybe color in any specifics around
Okay.
this.
But you will need individual recommendations on all agenda items.
You will act on each of them, as
Yes.
will the board.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, any questions on the presentation that we just got through hearing on the budget for fiscal year 2025-2026? Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Eric, great presentation. Thank you for walking
you.
us through all those details, and thank you for everybody that was involved in putting it together. Everybody in the back row back there, thank you so much. I was going through, I just had a couple of notes here, and so I'm going to flip through the presentation, and I just don't want to miss anything here. So just to confirm, if we went back and we were looking at slide number 7, the last time that we increased the hotel occupancy tax, you said, I think you said it was 2004? Or
Yes, 2004.
Okay, so roughly 20 years since we have touched that.
Yes, over
Want-
20, yes.
Wanting to make sure that everybody here in the room and watching at home knows that.
Now, you have had the permissive authority throughout that time to go up to 5%. And just we haven't chosen to do that. Quite frankly, I think there's a chance that you might lose that permissive authority if you don't take advantage of it. And I think also you've just got $1.2 million, $1.3 million a year that could help you with some other needs that it seems like with the activity that we see on the tourism and visitor side, that it's a missed opportunity if we don't do
Understood.
it soon.
Okay. Yeah, I would just ask as we look to do that maybe we partner up with Visit Franklin and meet with the hoteliers, the general managers, et cetera, here that are in the area. Maybe sit down for a 1-hour meeting with them and having city administrative leadership there. I certainly welcome attending that as well. As we're kind of moving down here, the next one I had was on slide 9. And there were 10 new positions, and I just wanted to make sure, I was trying to count them as you were presenting. You said it was 7 of 10 positions, or 7 of 8 is what I had written down?
7 and 8, there are 8 in the general fund. 7 of those 8 are in the public safety realm.
Okay, thanks. So that takes us to police and fire. And then on the next one there, if you could just elaborate a little bit more. You said that the new premiums for health insurance premiums, we're going to move to $650 and $1,350.
That's the deductible.
The
So
deductible,
the-
excuse me,
yeah,
excuse me,
the
the deductible.
The premiums themselves are unchanged, but the deductibles today are $500 for a single and $1,000 for a family. They would move to $650 for a single and $1,300 for a family.
And could you also just give us a little background? When was the last time that those were changed? Do you know?
I
off the
think
top of
it's
your head?
2003.
2003, so almost 20
Long
years
time.
again.
Long time, yes.
All right, thank you. And then going back to what you were saying on 10, just to verify, you were talking about making an adjustment. This is the first bullet point, talking about our compensation
Yes.
plan. You were saying, looking to move from where we were at 75% to now increasing our competitive nature to being inside the 90+% percentile, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And that's the exact move you did last year with the compensation plan and the pay schedule for police and fire. So this brings you alignment with the rest of the organization with what you did a year ago and in the current budget. So
Excellent.
it means because we did that, the adjustment in police and fire is not nearly as much as it is in the balance of the pay plan, because we made pretty significant adjustments last year.
Okay, thank you. And then just a minor line item here on slide 13, when we talk about changing Parks Department branding to Parks and Recreation. Do we know about what the cost is going to be to do that? And then also about how long it might take to rebrand everything?
We're going to do it as we do replacements. We're not going to
Okay.
go tear down a bunch of signs or do that kind of work. As we do things, we'll update the name. It's not going to be a significant cost. It will just be done over time of the course of when we might be doing other work.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. And point of clarification on the next slide, slide 14. This is on local sales tax, 52.4%. And again, just capturing the notes here, you were saying 50% of that went to education.
This is our component. This is our share.
component.
Ours.
This is
This is our
ours.
share.
Okay,
But when you look at that number that we generate, there's an equal number that's going to public education.
okay, thank you.
And never goes into our budget. It's just sometimes we forget that what's generated local option sales tax isn't just a city revenue. It's a 50-50 city revenue and support for public education.
And keep in mind that the total amount, when you go and buy this bottle of water, you're paying 9.75. That $65 million, $67 million for the city of Franklin is only 1.375% of that 9.75%. So we get an equal share to the county, but a full 7% goes directly to the state.
Thank
And that's
you.
really your funding source for that state share revenue that you see in the orange on that pie chart.
Okay. And I think the next thing that I'm looking at is on slide 18. This is revenues for financial performance. The thing that kind of stuck to me was, as I was looking at this on, and let me try to actually get to it here. The right-hand columns, as the chart indicates, our revenue and expenditures look like they're matching up right there, which is great. But I also look at that and thinking about some of our other performance indicators as far as our impact fees. And I know that we've talked about this offline, but I think it's essential that we make sure that we are looking at this on a quarterly basis as we move forward to see over the next 60 months, next 5 years, on what we're trending as far as our impact fees and how that may be decreasing or potentially increasing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's why we've got to look at that trending so that we can really evaluate that as we're moving forward. And then I think I've just got two more here.
And that
Yes,
is
go ahead.
something, you saw that on Tuesday when Catherine presented, that impact fees is one of the things she reports to you on, but we'll keep looking at how we provide that to you so that you can see those numbers.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think, you know, as we look at, this is on slide 22, this is talking about our property versus sales tax. I think this is essential that we continue to educate our Franklin citizens on, you know, where we stand within the state of Tennessee. If there's similar information, I know this one pager usually does a great job of describing some things, but I think right now, as we are talking about our property tax, that would be important. And then the last one
And,
that I
and we
have-
might also say
Yes.
that the sales tax doesn't just come from people who live inside the city limits. Anybody that spends any money here,
Yep.
whether they're in the county or another state or whatever.
And the last one that I had here, and I appreciate the lengthy number of questions or clarifications, is on slide 32. This relates to our downtown parking study. It's 50% match coming from the city's general fund. You said the other 50 was coming from our hotel motel.
Correct.
And I guess it's two-part, because the next bullet point, I have a question there. But do we know, are we anticipating that's going to close out in 2025, that study?
The studies, we're fully funding it in fiscal '26.
Okay.
But I would expect it's going to go over 2 fiscal years, honestly. by the time you get it up and just the time involved to do a study of that nature, I think there's a very good chance that that spreads across 2 fiscal years. It's fully funded in this budget, but I would expect we'll have some carryover in fiscal '27 that you'll have to rebudget.
Okay. And that's it on me. So thank you.
Next.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, staff. This is great. Couple things. One, I'm really glad that of the additional folks being added, that 7 of the 8 are in public safety. I think that's one thing. I don't think police requested any additional in there, or did they? And
They didn't specifically,
In
but
there.
one of the things we've been talking about,
Yeah.
we added some staffing a couple years ago, but we've been looking at that.
we discussed it at that
And we
meeting.
discussed it in this
And I
committee
appreciate
meeting
that.
as well.
Exactly.
And you look at those call numbers, they're well over
That's right.
65,000 calls for service a year. That plus the increasing number of special events is a significant demand.
Yeah.
And so when I talked to Chief about that, there was a pretty quick response that we could certainly use.
No, and I think that-
Additional bodies, and we may look at that again
Yeah.
in '27 and '28.
I appreciate that, and I did, when I saw that and heard that, I knew we had that discussion here, and I specifically said it'd be great to get back to that number of officers, because I do hear, in experience where, here, we've had reports and that kind of thing where we do need to have some additional folks on staff, and I think, or on shift, and so that's great. Fire as well. Thank you for the downtown parking study. Is not just counting spaces.
That's right.
And I think our meetings here kind of established the value of that, and a lot of consternation among the public in parking in downtown, and so I think that's going to be great use of our funds to develop some policies that are going to help us navigate some of those situations. I think it's important to also remind the public that, I think I saw in this budget, you didn't have in the slide, but our CIP, I think, had an estimated 66% cash on those projects. And that's an incredible amount
Yeah.
of cash that we put towards projects, and not debt.
Yeah.
It really is incredible. I think it's a great badge of honor for us to do that. It's not easy, and I know I see that in this budget. And so I appreciate that. Hotel motel tax, I think when I kind of have been talking about that for a little while, and the thing I hear and have been thinking about, and I think we all have, is that you have a lot of folks coming here and we're leaving some money on the table. And it's not our citizens paying it.
Right.
It's those that are visiting. I guess unless, sometimes I'll go stay at the Harpeth Hotel or something, for a fun night, out in their downtown, because it's like being a tourist in your own hometown, right? But I would tell you that after thinking through this and thinking about the marginal impact on our average nightly rate, which I think is in the 140s, 150s, something like that. I think that information was in the actual budget.
Great, yeah.
And seeing and thinking through that dollar and some odd change impact to the room nightly rate, that's something I'm willing to support, because I think where it's going into the hotel motel fund is funding a lot of the projects that we're hearing that people want, which is the land preservation that we've done inside Mac Hatcher with the Creekside, and Roper's Knob improvements, where that Roper's Knob, when we open up that 70 acres, and that is going to be a tourist draw. When you can hike in the middle, beautiful hills in our right at the end of Cool Springs Boulevard, and you can go up and see a Union Fort. That is going to drive even more tourism. And then the Carter Hill, the new visitor center that's opening. I think it's the right time. I'm glad we're not encumbering that long-term, which I think that's also important for those listening and who have other, I know they've been talking about conference centers and soccer fields and sports and athletic, whatever. I think our position is we're not going to wait until the big, beautiful idea comes forward. We're going to go ahead and start collecting that from the tourists that are coming. So I think the public needs to know that's the spirit behind that, and it's benefiting them and the people that are using their streets and amenities and people who are here staying, they're going to be paying additional funds to support their community, those things that they enjoy. So that wasn't a question. That was just more of an explanation, again, for the public, and have that on the record.
And that was
Last-
very intentional to
Very,
do.
yeah.
The things you have in this year and that motel tax are all this year funded things. The sports light field update, the barriers, those all take place within the four corners of that fiscal year. So that capacity is available for some other long-term needs, should you want to add it to the CIP formula or other things that you want to do. So we didn't want to tie you to one or two very specific uses with this new revenue flow.
So those are the comments on the easy parts of the budget.
Yes, that's right. And I do want one other thing I meant to say, when Vice Mayor Potts talked about this, we have already had a discussion, the mayor and I, with Maureen Haley Thornton from the CVB, and we've talked about how to talk about that with hoteliers and others in the community. So we're already working on that communication piece. We still are well below where a room in Nashville is in terms of the tax base. But I think we've continued to see our average daily rate climb in recent years, and I think that's a strong statement about the quality of product we have too, so.
Good. I appreciate you adding that in, seeing that my thought process was in alignment with what y'all are doing right now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Slide 38 is the last slide.
Yes.
And so I'm very disappointed that the Northwest Bridge was not included. I think everyone is. I think that, and I'll give a shout out to our traffic engineer, Adam Mosier, who, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe, gave us a first presentation of the Northwest projections into 2030, and kind of rung an alarm in my head and everyone else apparently here on staff. I mean, the projections are for 2030 are not great. And a lot of that just without any new development, just existing kind of background, just the background. No new development, no nothing on that side, just existing background. Because that east to west or west to east travel becomes more convenient for folks because of traffic elsewhere on interstates and that kind of thing. So I'm upset, I'm not happy about that. I am encouraged that I think there might be some spot improvements that could be done in those areas, and I want us to make sure that we plan for those. I think there's already some capacity if my fellow alderman would look at the Carruthers $38 million or $29 million again, and we may reallocate that when the staff comes back with some different maybe ideas to do some of those spot improvements in that area, because we cannot survive for 10 more years without some improvement over there. It's important the public knows that that is not us that is not wanting to build that road. We were willing to pony up half the cost of it to build that additional bridge. And yes, it should have been, we wish it would have been built however many years ago, but the truth of the matter is if we'd have waited and wanted to, or demanded that there were two bridges back then we wouldn't have even gotten to one bridge. There was a one, and Mayor Moore was involved with that heavily, and so was staff, and we really were lucky and fortunate, frankly, because of our state leadership and Mayor Moore and others to get the one bridge. So that's a common thing I hear is, well, we should have done the other one we were lucky to get the one. And this is case in point. We can't get, even by paying half of the cost of the second one now, they're not even entertaining it. I am hopeful, and I've talked, we've all had conversations with state representatives and leadership, and that there is a hope that in the next few years that it could be reconsidered. But all that to say, we don't have it, so we don't need to raise the people's taxes because we don't have anything to spend it on. We don't have that partnership opportunity. So I like scenario 2. And I also, so the first question is, when do you think we will realistically begin, so let me back up. The bottom point says the city needs $7.70 to service a $100 million bond over 20 years. Well, the math I'm doing is, well, we don't owe 100 million, we owe 50, right? Or that's our partnership. And so that is over, so that's 3.5 million. We're not going to be taking that bond out in fiscal year 2026, I would guess, on this partnership.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I am curious, so I'm hesitant to raise a revenue. I know why you put it in there, because it really is a commitment to the state that we're going to do it. I'm also not saying we need to remove it. I want to have a plan, maybe by the time we meet next, like, all right, well, we're expecting if this moves forward, that we're going to have X amount of expenses related to that partnership. If they go bid build, or what is it? We might
Design build.
Design build, not bid build, but design build, and we're a part of that, and maybe this gives us some, I kind of want to know a little bit more, like, okay, if we're going to do this now, that 3.5 this year and that 3.5 next year, it's not going to debt service because we haven't taken the bond out. What is that going to be used for? Or if there's a different phasing plan that you would suggest? Because I think,
Yeah.
I really want to make sure the public knows we want to partner on that project, but we also are not, we're maximizing partnership, but minimizing revenue generation that is not needed when it's, for that fiscal year. And you don't have to have an answer for that now.
I can give you a general answer
Yeah.
if you'd like, but I can't give you exactly a breakdown. One of the key things we'll be focused in on is moving that project up in the delivery timeframe. And when we submitted the application for the partnership funding, we indicated we would be willing to front money to move the project along. I've talked with our engineering staff and specifically city engineer Paul Holzen. One of the key components of that project is understanding how we need to improve the Lewisburg-Mac Hatcher intersection. That is probably the most challenging component from a design standpoint. Like I said, we largely own all the right-of-way, but there's going to be some reconfiguration of that intersection with, I think, utilities and how it works, just as it is. So his thought was, if we could do that, if we could get that solved, that might help move the project up. We already own right-of-way. Utilities are already where they really need to be for that project. So what happens sometimes in the 10-year project, just like any of these things, is something can't move forward as quickly as thought, especially if you have to acquire right-of-way. That can take longer than expected. And so since we don't have nearly that much of a component in this, we may be able to take advantage of that and move from where we are today much closer. And so having some capacity available to do some additional or early design that helps us understand probably the most challenging part of that project could really benefit us for being truly ready.
Yeah.
Ready to go. If they said go now, we could do it. I really would like to be in that position. So there'll be something involved there. We want to have more communication with TDOT about how we can do that and our willingness to do that. We've said it in the application, but we want to emphasize that and push forward. So that will be having some capacity to do that is helpful. I can't give you a number today, but we'll try to give you some sense of that.
Yeah.
And it could help you have to borrow less if you accumulate some cash over time for both this project and some other things in your CIP. So there's some trade-offs to think about.
And I hear you, and because the projected, as of today, construction is 2032.
That's what's in their plan right now.
So that's
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah.
And I want to just make sure, I hope it's 2027.
I think that's what we would push for too.
Really?
Exactly, yeah. I think
So I think and we have to be ready for that. You don't, if it really was going to be 2032, we wouldn't be doing this now, I don't
Exactly,
think.
yes.
But what I would say is, I'm actually, for the scenario 2, Mac Hatcher Southeast only, the 3.4 cents, I'd like to have the resolution written that's, and I'm willing to listen to different lines of thought and change my mind, but written so that is a dedicated, those funds go in the short term, a dedicated fund that can only be used, because we're telling the public that's going for Mac Hatcher Southeast, right, or Mac Hatcher. But let's say that 3.5 million, because there are a lot of details to iron out. If it's 3 years or before we have to have a bond, I want those $3.5 million spent on moving that forward, or put aside for cash payment of our obligation, so we have to take out less debt. I really feel like if we're going to the public saying, we're gonna raise your tax by 3 cents for Mac Hatcher Southeast, that we really need to make, we don't need it to be I don't want there to be any situation where that 3.4 4 cents or whatever it is goes to something else. And I'd love to just not have as much debt on this. And I think that's what you're saying. You can think about that and how you would do that if that's feasible with what we're doing, but I really want to be able to look the public in the eye and say, this is going to Magcatcher. It may end up being that $1 million of that goes to a northwest improvement in the next 2 years.
Yeah, there could be some
Or Franklin
spot
Road.
improvements. And I think when we come back on CIP, so I would think about that in that context, because that's also partnership funding in a way, that there are improvements you could make on Northwest to make it better for at least the short term. You talked about Franklin Road. There are some other things that you might be able to look at.
So maybe Magcatcher improvements.
Maybe, yeah, that's one way to look at it, or there might be some other improvements on congested state roadways that we could do something that makes it better than it is today, has maybe a 10-year benefit. That might be something to think about. There's some things in your CIP that might fit nicely, and when we look at some options, that might be something to look at. But, there are ways for us to look at how this plays into both delivering this project and maybe addressing some other priority needs.
So think about that language.
Yeah.
I'm good with it, but what I just really want to be careful of is going to the public and saying we're raising this it is actually specifically for a Southeast Magcatcher project, but something goes south on that, this goes that, with that sort of raise. I want that to be kind of siloed funding for state road improvements, partnership programs. Maybe that's how we word it, is that we can't take that then and go and, I don't know, rebuild this building or so, or it has to go towards transportation, roads, state partnerships. Have that written in there. I'd feel better about that. Not that I feel bad about it now, but I just think that as I thought through that, I think the public would appreciate those guardrails. And they may be, quite frankly, unnecessary for the folks sitting here in the room, but we also are reelected every 4 years. And so I'd love to have those kind of guardrails. If I'm going to vote on something like this, I want the guardrails on that money that is going to go to state roads, and specifically that project. And I think, obviously, another board can always come back and change that, but at least it'll make it a little bit harder for them to do it if they decided to do it. So that's one thing, and that can come back, and we can have more discussion on it, or offline, online, whatever. The second thing was this scenario 2, and I'm getting into the math, folks. I hope that's all right. We're going to have to get in the math.
Yeah.
It has to be done sometime.
Yeah, that's right. Operations, I noticed that the different delta there is in 1 and 2 is a rounding attempt, and we rounded up. I would rather have, I'm willing to do the rounding on this, but I'd like the delta to go into road projects too, and not into operations. So think about that, but I think that we were doing that to get it to a nice round 39 cent or 32 cents, right? I think that was why that was.
Yeah, we were trying to get to that, and quite frankly, when we were talking about this budget a week ago, this number was closer to 2.8 cents because we saw that kind of need in the operations, so we've already brought it down.
2.8 with a lower valuation.
Yeah, when we had that in mind, we clearly saw a justification for somewhere closer to 3 cents than 2.
But what was?
And we've used it as sort of our balancing number, but there's some needs for
So
sure.
was the 2.2 the number, I guess this is the better question.
Yeah.
What was the additional dollar amount? It was either 2.2 or 2.6.
At one point, it was 2.8 or 9 when we were.
Million.
Higher, yeah.
Because at
Million.
one point, we were assuming that it could be as high as a 55% change in valuation. It ended up being lower than that, but some of what we'd heard from the appraiser's offices, that was very realistic. So that was a rate that could have taken you all the way down to 21 cents. And in that case, we were proposing 6 cents, because a penny was worth more in that scenario.
Let me say this another way.
Yeah.
No, not because I think I'm doing a not great job of, so the 2.2 million is what I was saying.
Okay.
In your current budget.
Yeah.
What I like the budget.
Yeah.
And if there was $2.2 million, because this was based off of that prior assumption. What was the number for that operation revenue for the 7 public safety, for the, all the things we just talked about? Was that number in the 2.2 million range?
So for the additional staff that has been added this year, you're looking at costs of about $1.2 to $1.4 million. We wanted to make sure, because, again, the other premise that underlies this entire proposal is that you're going to take this opportunity and capture additional property tax revenue, and then probably not do it again until the next revaluation. And so we did not want to commit operating capacity beyond just those 8 positions. There's a lot of one-time things that we've got in this budget that take up that additional to get you to 2.2. We would have been more comfortable if it was 50-50, quite honestly.
No, I understand.
It's more 60-40, 65-35 of that additional capacity as it's on the screen. And, in the next 3 budget years after this one, we will be opening more parks and bringing them online, and there will need to be more staff there. There will additionally be public safety, there will be pension burdens that we know are going to be
I
coming.
understand. Here's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at scenario one. Mm-hmm. This is what we had. This is with the new evaluation, or the new value, what we have, and this was with Catcher Northeast, Southwest, Southeast and Northwest, apologize. And that option was 6.8 cents or 6, and then it was 0.21. That's a number there, 2.2 million. And then the scenario 2 is just a reduction of half of the partnership opportunities. And then in order to get to the round number, we changed it from 0.21 to 0.025, so that's
Yes.
nice and round. My question is, if we had just the 0.021, would we be able to fund the current budget? And you can come back and answer that. Would we be able to fund the budget, improve the enhancements? Would that be sufficient to do that?
Yes, there's no concern about funding
then-
the current.
Yeah, you can
Fiscal
make
year.
this year's budget work.
Yes.
I think what we look at, especially with dedicated operating funding, is kind of having a rate that you can live with over multiple years. Like when we did this in 2016, we essentially lived with that rate for 9 years. We didn't come back and change it. We did all the operational enhancements in 9 years with one rate.
Sure.
I'd kind of like to try to do that here if
Yeah,
we can.
absolutely.
And I think we can justify, I think 2.1 could be cutting it close. I think 2.5 could be cutting it close, quite frankly, but I understand where we need
You
to
see
be
what I'm
with
saying?
rate. I understand
You understand
that,
what
yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so,
For this year, we can definitely make it work. My question would be, 2 years from now, I'm not sure if that will be sufficient. We might have to have another discussion. So-
understood. All right. So the other thing is, this doesn't contemplate, well, let's just finish up on that. I'm interested in hearing additional ways possibly where we could take that 400,000 and put it into things that I know the public, those funds into roads or infrastructure improvements, it could be infrastructure-related improvements, and put that on maybe, just because I saw that as a rounding, we rounded up and it went to operations. So not that I don't hear what you're saying, but I think we can also, at this higher rate of the 0.021, we're going to get the benefit of additional properties coming online and that kind of thing, which leads me to, so I'd like some options on how we might do that, or if, I want to make sure that will work, the current budget will work. And we can always address it next year, because we look at the budget every year, right? And we can make a change. The second thing is, or that's not the second thing though, is that's a few more. But the last thing is, I'm curious if we've looked at projects currently under construction and evaluation and when they come online. So we've got, properties that are currently underdeveloped and there's assessed value there. And I know that also there's large projects in the Cool Springs area that are, and I'm curious how we look at that as well, and how that, it's a magic 8 ball.
Yeah, it is.
Right? But I do think that there are some that are pretty far along that we're not collecting on, that we will, and I just want to make sure the public knows we're,
One of the things we've
Doing
done
what?
with property tax and these in-between years between reappraisal, we used to not assume any growth until we
Right.
saw it. And now we've begun assuming somewhere in the 3 to 4% range of growth in property tax. That's borne out pretty well. I don't think we've overshot that in any years, but we've always been safe with that. I would suggest we do something in that line, be conservative, because there is always a timing component with that, when it hits the rolls and how that works. So I think you will see a consistent growth kind of build into that budget in out years. But I don't know that we'd see like a step function in massive growth in that number, but some.
And if you, page 58 of your budget has the 5-year model that Eric referred to. We assume a 3% growth in property tax year over year. Now, because of this exact rule that we've gone through now with the certified tax rate, and the assumption that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in the city of Franklin, Tennessee will continue its traditional policy, which is 37 of the last 40 years not raising the rate year over year. The only growth in property tax that is assumed is the growth for new properties. And so therefore, that we've built that into our overall financial model. Now, some years it will be more, some years it will be less. But again, as we just said, it's very much, and it is my favorite analytical tool, and my staff will validate that, the magic 8-ball. Knowing when they come online and being able to recognize.
So the wonderful development service, the development report that we just viewed on Tuesday that's been mentioned multiple times this meeting, way to go, was $361 million, if I remember right, $360 million worth of valuation is permitted in the first quarter of 2025. Did I
Correct.
get that right?
That's correct.
Was it 361?
361.
Man. I don't remember other things like that
Yeah.
well, but for some reason, numbers, I guess, but, that seems like a predictable, we can back into all right, 361 million has been permitted, it's gonna come in the next year. What is that 0.021 of operation, of additional tax gonna project to bring in the next year, right? I feel like that's a pretty sizable amount of additional revenue. So, I know we're being conservative with the 3%. I want to be really conservative. We're being conservative on our side, but when we're making this kind of decision, I really want to be conservative on the rate side as well. And I know you have been. That's the way we operate. And I tell people all the time, I'll put our budgeted revenues and our budgeted expenses up to anything out there as far as being conservative on the revenues and conservative on the expenses, because you're going to estimate higher expenses than we're going to have, and you're going to estimate lower revenues we're going to have. It's a winning combination for a balanced budget. But when we're looking at changing what we're going to ask the people to pay, I just want to make sure that we're taking into account that magnitude that I think is coming, especially in Cool Springs. I mean, within the next, year. So I don't know what you can do to satisfy that question that I have, other than how that relates to the decision we have in front of us, but I just want to make sure that we're not raising it more than we need to, and period. So I'd look at that too, the 2.6 to 2.2, the 400,000, somewhere for that to go, and then some sort of language to designate the 3.43 cents, 4 cents, to Mac Hatcher or State Road partnership opportunities. By the way, I think the future for us, we're gonna have to designate funds for TDOT partnerships, long-term. We're gonna have to figure out how we can long-term sustain this, because Mac Hatcher Southeast and Northwest is not the final one.
No,
We have Hillsborough Road, so we need to be thinking about a
You have the Murfreesboro
long-term
Road, I-65
Hillsborough,
interchange. You've got
everything.
lots of things that have needs.
I-65 interchange.
It is still a black box about what TDOT will do with partnerships. There were only 14 projects approved for partnership across the whole state. And when they added the $1 billion that the governor recommended, they added no additional partnership projects. I was shocked by that, quite frankly. I thought they would add some, and I was hoping Northwest Mac Hatcher would be one of those. It didn't happen. So it continues to be sort of an uncertainty about, if we knew I said this to him in August when we met with him, if we know what the target is, we'll meet it.
Yeah.
Because this is a community priority for us, for our board, for our community. And that's where we started speculating about what might work, and that's where the proposal that we came up with came from. It did get funded. We feel fortunate about
It's
that.
great,
But
yeah.
It's still a bit of a black box for us. So if we had that, that would make a lot of sense. We could come up with a funding stream that could go towards it over a long
Over a
period of
long
time
period of
and
time.
deliver a series of projects together.
If we knew what the formula
Yeah.
was long-term.
It would be great.
But I think we need to be thinking about that, and this could be that long-term, this plus something, but the citizens need to know that we didn't choose to do this. Our tax structure
Yes.
and their property tax structure was not built to have to pay for half of state roads. And when the when the paradigm changes, we're just fortunate that prior boards and staff have us in a fiscal position where we can even have this conversation. There are so many places that probably are having a harder conversation. So I really appreciate our state representatives and state senator and all the staff who have worked really, really hard on this and delivered something that 6 months ago wasn't on the list. It wasn't gonna happen in 10 years. I've taken up too much time, Chair, but I appreciate it. This is very important.
Alderman Peterson, you're next.
No further comments.
No further? I do have a couple of comments. We own the hotel motel tax.
Yeah.
Mayor, do you mind just telling us what you have done as far as communicating to the public that there is a real good possibility that that's going up? I heard
Yeah,
Eric.
we met with, go ahead.
Yeah, we met with Maureen Haley Thornton. We typically meet with her at least once a month, and then, of course, we're both on the board, and I serve on the Finance Committee, and we've had those discussions at least twice with her whenever we were initially considering it, and then as we looked that it'd be a little firmer, we've also told her that. She was going to communicate that to the hoteliers. We personally have not communicated to the hoteliers yet, but she's been working that for a while also.
She does do a regular meeting with the GMs of the hotel properties, and I offered to sit in on that meeting if she would like. And she sounded like she might take us up on that offer, but that ball's in their court in terms of if that's needed. But we're glad to do that and explain it. We really are the best practice in the state when you look at how we do it, because we account for those hotel motel tax dollars separately. They're in their own fund. You can see exactly where we spend it. We spend it on building and upgrading the conference center that we have at the Marriott. It's also been used for things like acquiring Harlansdale, acquiring Eastern Flank, where we sit today, doing projects that have enhanced our existing parks and youth sports offerings, all these things. So you can see a direct line to these projects and these investments, our support for the CVB and the marketing and promotion they do of our tourism product, all supported through that fund, through those tax dollars. Other places, other counties, other communities put it all in their general fund, and it gets put in the mix and it gets lost. And so the tourism industry and the local hoteliers don't really know what's being done to promote and help and support them. We can point right to it. And that's what you've seen a lot of discussion at the state level around putting strings on or clear connection to the elevation or collection of these taxes and a benefit to the tourism industry in a given community. So we already do that, which is good. But we're glad to support and have that conversation with anybody who is interested.
Well, and the reason I'm getting to that is because we've discussed the sales of hotel motel tax on more than one occasion. And
Yes.
probably for the last 6 or 7 years, we've always been kind of steered away from that, from the Visitors and I guess Convention Bureau, based upon the fact that there's an advantage to bringing a conference to Franklin rather than having it in Nashville, or rather than having it in Rutherford County, or rather than having it in Sumner County, or wherever it was going to. And basically, I think some of us probably just never said anything, but really didn't. The 1 cent hotel motel tax was not going to drive a convention from Nashville or from Franklin back to Nashville. Capacity may have been, convenience may have been, there was a lot of things that were. And I have a little vision, a little different than the hotel motel industry paying the tax. They don't pay the tax. They collect the tax, but they don't pay it. And so when you get ready to meet with them, or whatever the meeting is being called, it sounds to me as if you're doing a job that's already, there's a possibility there was a request made that you're doing the job that's already being done. And I know that we have, I know that I have asked each year or every, well, I'd say each year, that we go back and look at this right here, because I think unfortunately, I think it's revenue that we've lost over the last 4 or 5 years, and possibly not during the first year or two of COVID, probably wasn't that much, but I certainly think we've lost revenue over that. So that's kind of my take on that. I do think that, I do think that when we went back and looked at the certified tax rate, and it turned out to be a little more than what we thought, I do think that that was a wise move for you to go ahead and put it in as it was, as we thought it would be before it became a certified tax rate. I don't think there's any question whatsoever that the public probably reviews a politician as being able to spend $1 if he gets his hands on it. And I think that's where they kind of look at it. That's where I kind of look at it myself, other than I don't look at myself that much, so I don't do that. But anyway, there is a need for that. And I've said, to me, the most important road project is the road project from West Haven over to TSC. And that's not even on the radar. And so I mean, I think we can widen some, but until you get that loop around. And I said something to you this morning, or this afternoon, this morning, wasn't it? That you can go in there to any town in probably Middle Tennessee almost, whether it's Lawrenceburg or Columbia or Fayetteville or Pulaski, or whether it's Centerville or wherever, and they've got a better, in my opinion, a better road system with in and out traffic than what Franklin has. And I would think that at some point in time, we would want to look at what that does and how that works. And I know that we spent a great deal of money on projects, and a lot of the money is on making them pretty, not necessarily making them functional. And I would, we need to look at that, because there's just, $100 million is not going to go anywhere nowadays when we get ready to do a road, bridge, whatever we want to do. So I think it's a great presentation. I've made my 2 or 3 comments on it. And if there's any other, I'll yield the floor to anyone else that wants to make a comment on some of it.
Yeah, I'd love to make some comments if I
Yes.
could. First of all, I'd like to compliment Eric and their team. I happen to be in office enough to know how much midnight oil has been burned on this budget and creating it, also a lot of the challenges we've had. I'd emphasize that how often do we hear from our citizens that they want projects done, they want things done before, want the infrastructure done first. And so I'm one of 3 people in this room that have voted for property tax increases. And we bragged for years, it had been 20-something years since we had a property tax increase. The first one we did was 3 cents. The next one we did was in West Franklin with 10 cents. And the community embraced the fact that 10 cents was going for projects. I think that's where we're at again. The community is wanting projects done. We're wanting projects done. The list is large enough that what we're doing, it will not cover it. I don't know who told me this. It said, if you're going to do a tax increase, do a tax increase, because you're going to get the same pushback, whether it's half or twice that. I look at going with scenario 1 because I want to be able to have in my hand, when I'm with TDOT talking, that I'm not having to wait for another year or two to start getting the money. I think that money needs to be there now, and I think that our focus is going to continue to be focusing to get Northwest Macatcher on the list and get more clarity on what Southeast actually is. There's still a lot of mystery in that, and there's definitely a lot of mystery as far as TDOT and their statewide partnership program. We do have an election next year. I anticipate that Deputy Governor Commissioner Ely probably will be moving on, and probably we're going to see some changes there. Probably Will Reed, who's the Deputy Commissioner, will still be there, I would think, to maybe carry on this program, but we really don't know. So I think there's some uncertainty out there, and it's going to be hard to all of a sudden go back, I think. So I think this is our time of opportunity to move this thing forward. One of the questions I had, well, I have a couple of questions. What the household impact is as far as people's property tax with scenario one. Secondly, I understand the county is considering increasing their facility tax from less than 50 cents, I've forgotten exactly what it was, to $2.
34 cents.
34 cents to $2. And looking at my book, you know, we're getting, in 2024, we received $6,173,086 on county facilities tax. So my question would be, and you don't have to answer this now, but maybe later, is how much of that do we have obligated? And secondly, are there any, could we see some projections what that's going to do if they continue to carry through with that increase in facilities tax? Because there's still a lot of development going on in the county.
That's on new development, right? That's
Yeah.
on- okay.
Let's see.
It's not all new development, is it, in the county?
It is all new development across the county, and there's an adequate facilities tax that they charge, and we get a share for what occurs in Franklin from their component.
But
Now,
the
we have a city facilities tax, which is a separate
Right.
component, and that's where we've got it targeted for public safety and parks and sanitation. Those are the primary.
The proposal that's in play, though, is for the fee on the non-residential, I believe, not the residential. So it goes from the 34 cents to the $2
yeah.
on non-residential,
Okay.
because they levy both
And they-
residential and
That is
non-residential.
still just under consideration.
Correct.
They have a consultant who's going to help them, I think, do some projections. So I'm sure that consultant and Catherine will probably become friends because she'll be helping project out, give some projections based on what we've seen and what we could possibly expect in a period of time.
The other comments I was going to make, and I would emphasize what Alderman Baggett was mentioning, is that we're putting a lot of cash into projects. And when we put a lot of cash into projects, our long-term obligation is less. And I think that's a good point to make to the public. So I think those are my thoughts and
We can't answer a little bit of what you ask about. I should have mentioned this, but we did do a little bit of projection on what's the impact on an average homeowner for what's been proposed. And under the new appraised numbers, an actual average home appraised value is just a little bit above $1 million, $1,041,000. So under the current structure, well, that's just over $600 of city taxes paid and property tax. This would raise that to about $833, and a net increase of $231 for the entire year. That's 63 cents a day of tax component for $1 million home, just to give you a little bit of context. We do have a very low property tax rate, one of the lowest in the state. And when you look at cities over 50,000, it was the lowest. I don't know how it ranks now. It probably is, or very, very close to the lowest rate across the state. So even with this increase, it's 63 cents a day for the 32 cent rate.
So, hold on, that's for the full scenario one.
Yeah, that's for scenario one, that's the 63 cents a day. Scenario two, it's about 42 cents a day.
Scenario one, y'all might want to know, is about the cost of a Netflix premium subscription per month.
okay.
$19 a month. It's not, the magnitude is not, I think, and this is where I think we do a great job. And I apologize, Chairman, if Mayor was continuing to speak. Were you?
Yeah, I had one more comment,
Yeah, go for it.
and it's significant that we've seen our debt service ratio and our water, wastewater go from 1.2 something, which is marginal, to 1.48. So those increases that we've done were very important in our rates, so we could get back to a more acceptable ratio there. So that's all I've got.
I want to ask one question. If they're talking about raising the facilities tax for non-residential in the county, how much non-residential is there actually in the county?
It's really for countywide, so it would
Oh,
include
countywide.
Franklin.
Oh, okay.
So it would
I
include the
understand.
incorporated areas, it's just a county-collected
Okay.
facilities tax.
Yeah, if it was just in the county, it wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be a lot. Anything else to add?
To answer the mayor's question, so on the county facilities tax, we have a balance, we're forecasting a total fund balance at year end of 6.2 million. We average around $900,000 a year coming in. Those funds we have historically used only for approved CIP projects, and usually ones that have some type of connection or nexus to public facilities.
Exactly.
Public facilities are specifically schools.
Yep.
Now, that's entirely up to you, quite frankly.
Correct.
You can use it however you see fit on projects I would suggest be a primary focus, but you have flexibility. We have just chosen from a policy
Exactly.
standpoint to look at infrastructure and specifically infrastructure around schools or public facilities. We did some things to help with the enrichment center and that kind of stuff to contribute there as well.
Of the 10-year CIP, we are forecasting that would be around, well, 900,000 times 10 is 9 million, and you're a balance of 6, so you'd have really about $15 million to look at using over the next 10-year window, of which 11.5 or so is committed into approved projects, at least in the financing model. So there is some capacity still open for additional projects within the financial model, just to answer that question, sir.
Gentlemen and lady, any other questions or comments?
Our only request would be an action to move items
we'll-
4, 5, and 6 onto the board.
Well, I'm sorry to continue to belabor, but what are we recommending to the board? On the last slide, the last slide, Mayor said he liked scenario one, and I had an alternate scenario two, and I think, I haven't really heard what everyone,
Yeah,
I would like for us to make a recommendation to the board of something.
That's up to you how you want to handle that. I've
Don't you
recommended
think?
the budget, I've recommended.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, because I know what's going to happen when it gets to the board, there'll be more of this, and I think if we give them a very specific, somewhere in between, or whatever it is.
That's pretty specific, somewhere in between, yeah. Yes.
I think without prejudicing them, I would send them scenario one and scenario two.
That's wise.
And that way, they aren't prejudiced by our discussion.
Yeah, that's wise. I rescind that suggestion then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So the motion that we would be making on number 4, which is the budget, would be scenario 1 or scenario 2?
Yeah, you'd advance both for the board's consideration, is the way I heard that.
Board?
One or two, I made those comments though about the encumbering, making sure that 3.5, how would you suggest a motion? Or do we just bring this up?
I think that's, I mean, the board's going to need to make that decision ultimately. So I think you give them a framework they can work from.
We'll leave them
We
the
can-
same.
We can work to provide some of that as options or additional kind of color to the proposal.
Yeah. So motion to
yeah.
recommend as presented,
And that's it.
and then we will have the additional color added at
Yeah.
that discussion.
Okay?
And 6 is really just talking about the hotel motel one.
Correct.
So, yeah, so the item
So
four,
the
which,
tax rate is what we're doing now.
well, your current agenda item is the budget document and the spending plan.
Okay, so,
Okay.
The next item is the property tax
Exactly.
Rate
Exactly.
rate
So that
itself.
might be your scenario 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That's scenario
And
1
so,
and 2.
Mr. Chair, there is a motion on the floor to recommend to the full board the presentation as it was presented in agenda item number 4. Properly said?
exactly.
I will,
Said.
thank you. I will second that
Second that.
motion. Yes.
Any further discussion? Then let's do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes,
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that. Let's go to item 5 then, which is the municipal property tax rate for fiscal year 2025-2026 and providing an effective date. So that is the 32 or the 29, right?
We can't.
But that is the effective date, or is it the rate and the date?
Yes.
Both. It's both. It's, as proposed is on screen currently, which is the rate of 32 cents.
Right.
And it sets an effective date. So you will end up voting
Well,
this ordinance as to set a property tax rate as you do every year. The question, of course, is what that number is.
And you could make a motion to incorporate scenarios 1 and 2 for
Right.
board consideration. That might be a
Okay.
way for you to,
okay.
those are the two options I think that have honed in on or think are worthy of consideration. That might be one way to look at it.
So, Mr. Chair, just to kind of streamline the administrative piece of this is you've already got scenario number 1 here on the screen, correct?
Correct.
And in an effort to keep the ball moving forward, I would think that you would need to have scenario 2 also written because we just moved agenda item number 4 forward, and we're only presenting those 2 options as of now.
both the prior agenda item and this agenda item are based on a selected tax rate structure. And so we're really just recommending the discussion to
Discussion.
proceed, and we're not actually recommending a specifically written ordinance at present. We're recommending that the greater board discuss the previously recommended budget and discuss the property tax options within the scenario. I mean, if you put this up there and you say, do I want to recommend this to the board, I'm going to vote no, because that is very detailed. We don't want to do that and have this, like as the mayor said, this conceived opinions. So would we just recommend that discussion be had and not, or do we have to recommend the specific ordinance text?
I think I would ask that you maybe consider forwarding to the board for their considerations 2 options for property tax for the 2026
We can
budget.
easily write
Thank you.
this.
Right.
Is it 32-cent rate or 29-cent?
And that's what I was saying a moment ago, is go ahead, have both of them prepared, and that keeps us on track, at least according to the timeline, Eric, that you stated in the beginning.
Very good.
Good.
So the motion would be, as the mayor stated, I would propose that the staff send 2 options to the board, written ordinances for consideration.
32 or 29.
Yes.
All right,
Motion, I'll second his motion.
okay. Proper motion in a second. Let's do a roll call vote on that one also. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes,
And Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote on that?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that. Let's go to item 6 then. We may want to put 4 or 5 options on 6. We could go
I'd really like just one if you could.
Yeah.
10
So
10
I'll-
options, 1/10 of a cent each.
All right.
Okay, consideration of draft ordinance 2015-15, an ordinance to amend
2025,
Oh,
There's a
yeah,
typo.
Yeah, there's a
You got
typo.
it wrong.
But it's not here. Let me
Well-
get right through that.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and make a motion to forward this or recommend this for approval to the board as is currently written.
Second.
Proper motion to second. Let's do a roll call vote on that then. All in favor of the motion as presented? Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also. Okay, 4 to 5. Item 7.
Item 7 is a resolution. It's the last piece of the budget recommendation. This is an item that, quite honestly, is our belt and suspenders ordinance regarding the water budget. It's a piece that helps us get it passed through the state so that we specify, because it is a different fund, it's a proprietary fund. Even though we include it in this master document, it specifies, as you can see how it's written, the exact pages just for the revenues and expenditures, and helps approval at the state level. This is a one-reading resolution. You will see it now, and then you'll see it again on June 10th when all the other public hearings are occurring for the budget approval.
You've listened to Michael Walters Young's explanation. Do I hear a motion on item 7?
I move for approval, or move this to recommend for approval to the board as currently written.
Proper motion, is there a second?
Second.
Let's do a roll call vote on it too, all right? Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
The chair votes yes also. Item 9, consideration of procurement award to Crosland TL eight, I'm sorry. A resolution of the board, item 2025-38, a resolution of the Board of Mayor and Alderman for the city adopting the estimate of revenues and expenditures for the water and sanitation utility fund for, that was one we just voted on. Number 8 is then the one we're on, consideration procurement award to Crosland P LLC of Nashville, Tennessee, an annual amount of $59, $63, $67, $72, and $75,000 for years 1, 2, 3, and optionally for 4 and 5, respectfully, for annual financial and compliance auditing services for the city purchasing office procurement solicitation number 2025-16, funding to be budgeted in the city's general fund, water and wastewater fund in fiscal year 2026, 2027, 2028, and optionally 2029 and 30, contract number 2025-160 or 0160. I guess that's pretty good, just to leave out 10 and all of that.
That would be me.
Yes.
It's been 5 years since we went out for solicitation for our auditing services. So this, we are recommending to stay with Crossland P LLC of Nashville, who has been our auditor for the incumbent. So we are recommending, ask that you recommend to the full board for this to be approved contract. This is for the city.
And I move that we recommend the approval to the board.
Proper motion, a second?
Second.
There is a second. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote on that?
Yes.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes also. Alderman, let's see, we've got consideration, number 9, consideration of procurement award to Crossland. Let me just skip some of that, and because this is on the conference center, same scenario, same years, different amounts. Margaret, you're up.
And that is kudos to Brian Wilcox, who wrote that 5 years ago, and I copied it. But yes, this is for the auditing, procurement award to Crossland to audit the conference center. Same thing, we ask that you recommend to the full board approval of this contract.
All right. Proper motion, or proper suggestion. I'll take that as Motion, you don't do a motion
I
there.
move that we recommend it to the board.
That's a proper motion. Is there a
Second.
second? I have a second. Let's do a roll call vote quickly on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also, 4-0. Okay, number 10, report of annual compliance for 2024 with the Municipal Finance Officer Certification and Education Act of 2007. Margaret, you must be up again.
I am. This is just for informational purposes that we do comply with the state TCA code that we have to have a CMFO on staff. We actually have 12 on staff and 4 going through it currently. And Christine Brock is our designated CMFO.
Do you need a motion on that? You don't, do you?
I don't
Just for
believe so.
report? Okay.
report.
Then, let's go to item 11 quickly, and that is monthly reports. Margaret, you up again?
I am. I'm going to, as usual, make this short and sweet for you. I just want to highlight, building permits are up 4.4% over last year. Gas tax is more than last year by about $12,000 for this time last year. Of course, that's February. We always get those 60 days behind. And currently, the general fund surplus as of February 2025 has a $6.3 million surplus. Sorry, I did not get that sentence out correctly. But as we know, this will change as we go throughout the rest of the year with final invoices coming in and final budget amendments and everything, so.
Good report. I would say this, if we get another item like 8 and 9, I may let you read those.
I will do my best next time.
Put that in AI and have it simple.
Any other questions or comments to come before the committee? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Proper motion, a second.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good meeting.
Great.
Thank you, Eric.
Well done.